Mr. Liveris, thank you so much for coming today to Concordia, and may I also express thanks for being one of our newest members of our Leadership Council here at Concordia. So
that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you. It's pretty hard to say no to you two. You guys are a force of nature, and so I'm very proud to be part of your incredible efforts. And you know, this gathering, which I was in front of 2 years ago, you've just expanded and expanded. So you know, we're very proud to be part of this. So thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. So, Andrew, as a CEO of one of the largest companies in the world, I want to talk a little bit about your perspective when it comes to public-private partnerships. We talk a lot at Concordia about how we see a trend. We see a real change happening, that CEOs look at public-private partnerships as the way to scale, whether it's positive societal impact, but also good business. So can you talk a little bit about that?
You know, you're going to have a lot of speakers today, and my colleague and my good friend Muda Kent will follow me, and I think you'll see us talk language that maybe a few dozen CEOs around the world of global companies are now speaking. And the way I phrase it is, we're living life as humanity at intersections. And those intersections are forcing us all to collaborate in a way that the public-private partnership model is now embedded in the solution space. Our company, pretty visionary leaders 30 years ago, established it, and for example, established a corporate environment advisory council that consisted of NGOs of all shapes and sizes from around the world, who sat and advised our board and our management on, at that time, our 1995 environmental health and safety goals. What those intersections are doing, it's the intersection of the sciences. If you're in universities, you know that already. Interdisciplinary sciences. It's the intersection of business, government, and society in the public policy space. It's the intersection of the real economy and the financial economy, which is creating massive dislocations. And if you're sitting at those intersections, either in a CEO role like mine, in the role that you are promoting here at Concordia, making sense out of all that to get the solution space taken care of. And what's the solution space? The solution space is very clear. We're adding people to this planet. We don't have an alternative planet. So we need a blueprint that makes sense, and that voters who vote know that their quality of life is protected in all of its dimensions, whether you're at the bottom of the pyramid or in a developed society. In all of doing that, and think of the issues, you know, feed more people, provide food safety, get better water quality, available water. There are people without water today. All those issues are business opportunities. And if you don't frame them as business opportunities, you've lost the plot. Because frankly, the legacy issues of the past that got us to the table as a modern society, the mistakes of the developed world, should not be repeated. We should be generation skipping through these collaborations. So our company has collaborations with over 150 NGOs, over 200 universities. We are not in the not invented here syndrome. And as we develop the 95 goals, we call them our, let's call them our footprint goals. Look after the asset, look after the enterprise. Inside the facility, inside the enterprise. Our 2005 goals that we just closed down on 2015, we call them our handprint goals. We send products out to you, yet you don't know what they do to you as you interact with them. So transparency on the effect on humanity of our products. Our 2025 goals that we just launched, we're calling them our blueprint goals. Footprint, handprint, blueprint. We should all be living in the blueprint world today. And that is to solve the problems of humanity and create the do good and do well and do good mindset. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew, I'd love to ask you, as a global company, in how many countries do you operate?
182.
182. There's like 183 countries in the world. So. But operating all around the world, you interact with governments, state governments, local governments, federal governments. And I wonder what sort of themes you encounter, not you personally, but Dow encounters when interacting with governments. Do you find it is easier in one part of the world, more difficult in one part of the world? That's a question that people always ask us when they learn that we run an organization that has public-private partnerships. They say, who's more difficult, the public sector or the private sector?
Well, it's not trying to offend any nationality in the room. I think the way I would frame the answer is, and actually it was in the book I wrote a few years ago around manufacturing, we see countries behaving like companies more and more, because they're solving the one quintessential topic of our time, the quality of life and the inequality of income, the youth unemployment that goes with that. These are huge issues that can only be solved with meaningful jobs for our people around the world. The countries bucket themselves into two types. I call them red carpet countries and red tape countries. And those two types are pretty clear. And the other way of thinking about it, which is, I'm an engineer, is numerator countries and denominator countries. Denominator countries spend time on regulatory activity without consulting who you're regulating. And that's a cost, that's a burden, and that's a lack of a synergy. The risk-benefit trade-off of the best regulation, a numerator regulation, we want everyone to have a higher quality of life on this planet, don't we? And so how do we actually get all the regulations to work with society so that we can actually put those regulations in the numerator? What we find is red tape countries establish bureaucracies and can't unestablish it. It's calcified. And you know, there's great examples of that, probably here this week. We'd say red carpet countries, they put advisory groups together of the collaborative kind, you know, directly to the head of state in many cases, that involve these groups that are at these intersections. And you know, I'm not going to kind of start labeling unless you really force me to, but I mean, these are very evident to all of us who go around the business world. I do roughly 40 countries a year in terms of visits. I'm outside of the United States on my tax returns last year, 225 days. This is a relationship-driven world still. And when we're living in society, rule of law, rule of logic, rule of relationship. Who's got the primary in those three rules? If you don't have a relationship, the other two make no sense. So you've got to show up, and you've got to speak your values, and you've got to speak what you're there for, which is citizenship. Because after all, whether you're a company or a person, you're a citizen.
Talk to us a little bit about talent and talent retention. I remember, and I might get this stat wrong, so I apologize, but in 2013 when you spoke here, I believe you said you employ 4,000 PhDs at Dow?
Yes,
so
5,000 now.
5,000. That's an incredible, I can't get over that number. Talk a little bit about how you're engaging talent today, and also, I want to bring it home for a minute, in the US. What are your thoughts about sort of the next generation and the next employee pool? So
a couple of stats to add to your stat. 35% of the Dow workforce from 2010 to 2015 was hired in those years. So a third of our company is new. We now have 30% of our company who's 38 years or less, age 30 or less. We have generationally begun the change of our company for its future. As I speak right now, we have 45 employees in Surabaya who are part of our leadership and action group, all age 30 or less, all up-and-comers across many disciplines, who are working with the Surabaya community in fisheries, in food safety, in agriculture, and water supply, and they are market makers. This generation that's coming up, thanks to the internet and all the digital world we're growing into, are market makers. We have great examples in your sponsorship, like Uber. We are making markets. And as we make markets, they want to make markets that actually have a meaning. And so our whole view to science is to put science to work to create sustainable solutions for these new markets. And these young people, and everyone is young at heart, I know, I am, I get that point. But this new generation, that's what they're being employed for, and we have that value proposition in the company. That's what we've changed in the company these last 10 years. And yes, here in the United States, I would tell you this whole notion of our country having all the solutions is wrong. I hope that's not an aha moment for you. We have big issues in this country, yet the next generation of entrepreneurs, many of them are coming from this country. We have created an ecosystem in this country that encourages innovation and entrepreneurism. A lot of it is in the collaborations of the private sector that creates small, medium, and large. The startup community, whether it's out west or out east, is doing very, very well. Companies like ours are tapping into it by employing scientists who have a mission and who have a passion.
Andrew, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about our homeland, Greece. I think we have a few Greeks in the audience. And you've been heavily involved in helping Greece recover from its crisis. And I wonder, one of the things I think that Greece has tried to do to varying levels of success is use public-private partnerships as part of the re-emerging of the economy. You've seen various different areas of success. The city of Athens is actually a leader in that. I wonder if you might comment on the current situation in Greece and your thoughts about the future.
Greece is not only our common ethnicity. I'm, of course, Australian Greek, and I live in America, and I lived in Asia most of my career, so I'm a citizen of the world. When the call for action came from Prime Minister Papandreou to the American business community who had Greek roots, we responded. We have a large operation in Greece, so we have a lot of employees, and it was actually our first investment in Europe was in Greece as a company. It also is an access point for our large investments in the Middle East. We're using it as transshipment, and it became very evident that the business community in Greece was losing confidence in the Greek crisis. And so this engagement that Prime Minister Papandreou started through Prime Minister Samaras and now Prime Minister Tsipras has not yet solved the major structural issue of the Greek economy. Needless to say, it's a red tape economy. It's a large public sector. They need an injection of not just the collaborations you talked about, public-private partnerships at every level of the economy. They need the mindset shift at the very top of the economy. And the very top of the economy, led by the Prime Minister, the mindset around that after the almost war this year with the EU that led to the brinkmanship, that led to the solution space. I was with the Prime Minister this week, and I think there's the beginning of a U-turn in thinking to Greece does not want to leave the euro. Greece needs to stay in the euro, and companies like ours can help them with business advice on how to get the economic reforms to establish competitiveness in industries that they can win at. Unlike Italy, unlike Spain, Greece doesn't export, and it's a major importer, and so this is a major issue for them. They don't really have a large private sector economy. The good news is, and I think maybe not to speak to us, but to anyone who notices, Greeks who left Greece have done very well. So it's nothing to do with ethnicity. It's the system, right? Don't we see that around the world? Systems that don't encourage young entrepreneurs or innovation of the small mediums and collaborations. What do those systems look like? And so, the index I saw earlier is a good example, and we see great results out of Chile as a company, for example. So look, we're doing our very best to, firstly from the ethnic side, but as a company to help that country reach its potential. That's what we do around the world. We localize everywhere. I mean, our large investment in Saudi Arabia right now, it's a $20 billion investment, $10 billion with Dow, $10 billion with Saudi Aramco. We're employing young Saudis. We've got over 4,000 of them about to start up the world's largest industrial complex of all time. What is that for? That's for young Saudis to learn that there is jobs beyond the oil sector, to diversify that economy, to fulfill the vision that the young unemployed have, and not to go to alternative pursuits. This is a very powerful implementation mechanism of companies like ours, where we can build supply chains and help people lift themselves to the next standard of living.
I think we have...
Thank you. That's okay. That's okay.
One more.
That's okay.
I think we have time for one more question, Andrew. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about China.
Yes, that's not a 2-minute answer. So, look, the president's visit, the Obama White House, the engagement that was started really with Hank Paulson and the S&ED process under the previous leadership of the country. I would tell you that China's emphasis on S strategy, as if there's some foreign policy adversarial position with the United States, is the wrong conversation. China's focus is on E, economic development, and they're transitioning. And I've been going to China since 1976, when I was a young engineer at Dow, going in for the first time. And I've seen China in every phase of its history in the last 30 years. I've seen the Deng Xiaoping opening up the market economy and all of the problems it created with the inequality point that they're now living with. They're transitioning, and they're transitioning in a manner that is very different to a Western economy. It's top-down. It's very, very much a design, a good engineering design. It's a 5-year plan. If they pull it off, well, they will pull it off. It's just that we have to be very patient with the trajectory. We at the West have become so short-term oriented. We measure things in 90-day sound bites. That they don't. I mean, they measure things in massive economic reforms to help their citizenship enjoy the quality of life we all do. You know, the 2 100s that Henry Kissinger talks about, China will attain the 2 100s in 2023 and 2049. They have plans for both of those years. Who amongst you have plans for 2049? Okay? I mean, my board doesn't ask me for plans for 2049. Okay? And, you know, we've got to think about them that way. So as they manage this transition, what's wrong with establishing the rules of engagement economically? Let's put together a bilateral investment treaty with the Chinese now to help them make this generation skip in technology, and let's start to trust each other based on relationships. And that's what we're doing as a company. We're growing very much in China, and yes, there's stops and starts and volatility, but the trajectory is clear.
Wow, perfect timing. Thank you very much,
Zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you so
questions.
much.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you very much, Nick. That's excellent. You guys